Hey, it's Rachel Cooke, your modern mentor. I'm the founder of Lead Above Noise, where we help leaders amplify performance, dial back burnout, and lead through change that never seems to let us catch our breath. If your organization or team is in need of skills, tools, or advice on making these happen, please reach out today. And before I jump into today's episode, just a reminder to leave a review if you can swing it. It helps new listeners find the show. Okay, so today, I am excited to bring you this interview with Dr. Rich Safir. When it comes to workplace wellness, I literally couldn't think of anyone more qualified to hop on and have this chat with me. Because workplace wellness is moving in the wrong direction. And Dr. Safir is here to help. He is the Chief Medical Director of Employee Health and Wellbeing at Johns Hopkins Medicine, where he leads the Healthy at Hopkins Employee Health and Wellbeing Strategy. He also holds faculty appointments in the School of Medicine and Public Health at Johns Hopkins University. And in this conversation, we really took a deep dive into how we can stop making workplace wellness just about initiatives and programs, often ones that people aren't using anyway, and move toward a culture of building wellness into the rhythm of our work and our days. And also, he's just really lovely. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Dr. Rich Safir, Chief Medical Director, Employee Health and Wellbeing at Johns Hopkins Medicine. Thanks so much for joining me on the Modern Mentor podcast. What a pleasure to speak to you.
And I appreciate the opportunity to share what I can with you and your audience. Thank you.
Yeah, you really had to twist my arm because these days, workplace well-being, I mean, who's interested in talking about that? I think we're all fine, don't you?
Yeah, just a smidge more improvement and we'll be where we want to be.
Sure. I feel like every year, I've been in the workplace, a good number of them at this point, but I feel like every year just feels like a little more brutal than the last. I don't mean that in any sort of accusing way, and I'm not pointing fingers anywhere, but it's just like the toll that I feel like the collective human spirit has been carrying just feels extraordinary.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that. But before we do, I just want to back up a little bit and learn a little bit about this really amazing sounding job that you have. Can you give us like the 90-second backstory on how you landed in this space?
Oh, in 90 seconds. That's good. So I knew I wanted to be a doctor in high school, and I became a doctor in medical school. I thought I was going to be a practicing family doctor for 30 years, like Marcus Welby, for any of your audience members who knows who that is. And after 2 years of practicing, I realized I wasn't having the impact that I thought I would. And I also realized that most of my patients were going to a workplace. And a light bulb said, hey, they're spending 15 minutes with me and almost 2,000 hours a year in the workplace. And Rachel, that began my not so straight path to my position today.
Wow, that was impressive. And I think that was like 72 seconds. So,
I was going to ask you if I got under the wire. Thank you for tracking.
But I am curious. So Director of Health and Wellbeing, is that a position that has always existed at Johns Hopkins?
No, not at all. And in fact, I got into this field more than 25 years ago after leaving family practice, and I was still seeing patients part-time. So, in your intro, you're talking about, gosh, it always seems like we're still clawing away and trying to rise to a more well place. It's been really interesting to see how things have, in some ways, moved forward, in other ways have moved back. In other words, the, let's say, emotional state or mental health state of our workforce, I think, has moved backward. On the other hand, the resources that employers are putting forward, including full-time positions to address, has moved forward. So I took the job at Johns Hopkins Medicine not because of the job they were offering, but because of the position I knew I could build, or at least I had the confidence I could build. And this is without telling you like the 5 steps in between. So essentially, Rachel, I made the case at Johns Hopkins Medicine that they needed this type of work. And 13 years later, here I am.
Incredible. So talk to me a little bit. I'm speaking to you as a workplace consultant with absolutely zero medical training whatsoever. But as a physician, talk to me about, what are you seeing in the realm of workplace and well-being, whether you want to stick those words together in a single phrase or take them apart.
Yeah.
What are just some of your observations?
Well, I just want to reflect on what you said. You may not be a physician, but you may impact the health and well-being of more people than you realize. And every one of the people listening to this program today, I want you to know what I just said a couple of minutes ago. Your workforce is spending most of their day working, not in the doctor's office. So
Yeah.
don't sell the opportunity short. So what am I seeing now? We have the pandemic and a huge amount of stress and a huge amount of disconnectedness. And we were kind of on a recovery path. And now it seems like we've taken a step back. There's a lot more stress than there was a year ago, a lot of different industries. So, by the way, yes, I'm a physician. I work for a healthcare organization. But in my previous roles, I had experience with all different parts of the economy. So I'm pretty versatile in the different sectors. So most sectors of the economy are experiencing new stressors in the past 6 months, adjusting to circumstances that have put a strain not only on the organization, but the people who work there.
My understanding is that everybody physically experiences stress or anxiety in different ways, right? And I think there's this thing that happens sometimes where people sort of think that they're fine because maybe they think that stress is supposed to look one particular way. And they may be like, well, sleeping through the night, so I'm probably fine. Or, I have sufficient energy, so I'm probably fine. And I suspect that it can be easy to allow stress to creep in and creep to a concerning level because there are symptoms that may not fit what we thought it was supposed to look like that we're actually experiencing and we're maybe not paying attention to. And I wonder if you have an opinion on that. I'll stop there. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, most people have stress, and
Yeah.
their work and their workplace is often the number one or two stressor in their life. And yes, it can look differently. More than people not recognizing they have stress, I think a bigger possible challenge is people's willingness to admit to others that they have stress, because they may not think that it presents themselves as professionally as they want to present themselves. And that's a shame, because we really can all benefit from being able to discuss this important part of our well-being openly, and just to have the company and the support of others. I think it's something like 70% of working Americans have moderate to greater stress at some point during the work week. So most of the people that we're working with are having a challenge at least part of the day.
What do you want people to hear, to understand? What change do you want to inflict upon us?
Foremost, we can't just relegate our health and well-being to after or before work. We're working 8 or 9 hours a day, some people more. So if you don't integrate health and well-being throughout your day, you're not going to have much of a retirement. You're going to be probably having at least one chronic disease during that time and probably won't live as long as you'd like to. And so developing or finding and developing skills that you can integrate into your workday, I think is probably one of the most important parts of your job. You don't have to wait for like a half-hour lunch break to have health and wellness, nor should you wait. That's probably the biggest message.
Okay, that's great. I would love to dig into that a little bit. What does that look like? Where do we start?
Well, there's a lot of common practices that the human resource community has been embracing for years that really are also health and well-being practices. So we can start with those, then we can maybe move a little into the more what some people would call traditional health and wellness, showing appreciation for each other, being able to collaborate as a team. We learned about social connectedness like as in a crash course during the pandemic. but it's always been there. It's just that it hadn't gotten the attention that it wanted. So you name like the variety of core HR practices that we want our workforce to exhibit, and there is likely a connection to health and well-being. Now, from a core, like, hey, let's talk traditional health and well-being, any practice that you do outside of work, you should try to figure out how to do it inside work. So let's take, for example, you exercise outside of work. Can you stand during a work day? Can you walk during the workday? Can you have a walking meeting? Can you walk to a further bathroom, not the one that's right around the corner? Can you take the stairs instead of the elevator? If you do something after work to lower your stress or before work, maybe you meditate before or after. Is there a reason why you can't take a 5-minute break to do the same or have it be part of your lunch break? But even more importantly than that, learn about mindfulness skills that integrate with your day, like mindful walking. If when you're going to walk to that bathroom, can you feel your feet hit the ground and then lift off so that you're not ruminating over the project that you just left at your desk? You're now more present with your feet. And there's a whole bunch of other skills like that, Rachel.
It is really interesting. I think there are a lot of people out there who feel like, well, if I'm not walking for an hour, if I'm not meditating for 30 minutes, then it doesn't count. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And I think I hear you describing like incorporating some of these just micro practices into our day.
You might be doing it already. Rachel, what do you do during the workday to help yourself, whether it's physically helping, socially connecting, some type of physical habit that you try to pursue?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's so funny. I was just on a call earlier today with a colleague of mine who was saying that she is so burned out. And it's funny, I just recently launched a 4-part series on burnout. So this is very top of mind for me. And she was saying she's so burned out. She is working constantly and she can't dial back the work. She's a single mom. She doesn't know what to do. And what I said to her was, I think we have this misunderstanding, and I am going to answer your question, but I said, I think we have this collective misunderstanding that burnout is only a problem of volume, and the only way to solve it is by reducing workload. So when we aren't empowered to reduce workload, there's nothing we can do about burnout. And I said, I really, really disagree with that. And so I said to her, I want you to think about a time when you were really busy, but you weren't feeling burned out. And I want you to think about what was different then as compared to what's going on for you now. And she was able to make some really nice observations. She mentioned, you know what? I haven't been just taking 10 minutes out of my day to call a friend. I realized that I work better. I work more effectively when I do that. I haven't been as mindful of drinking my water. So we just had this really interesting conversation about don't think about the impossible. Don't think about reversing something 180. What are some small things you can do? And it's something that I try to do also in my own work days. To actually answer your question, I recognize that on the days that I feel my least well, I'm doing some of these same things. I am a person who has a big appetite for connection and community. And I know that it is easy for me. We have, there's a block around my house. It is 0.8 of a mile. It takes me like 11 minutes to walk it. And I try at least 3 times a week to do that walk while I'm having a quick catch up with a friend. So that's something I really like to do. I do try to drink a lot of water. I think one of my biggest opportunity areas is, I call it head trash, but I definitely let it get the best of me, right? And I know that I could benefit from practices that would sort of help me process it faster, help me take the trash out, if you will, faster. I feel like I tend to carry it for too long.
Yeah, that can be draining probably.
It's exhausting. Yes. Do you have any tips?
Well, I have some ideas, but I don't know you well enough to tell you to do this. And what I would just suggest is that there are particular mindfulness practices that are focused on helping individuals lose less energy during the day so that they have more energy during the day and after work. So what I'm thinking is heart-focused breathing and other heart math related exercise. So for you and your audience, heart math is spelled as one word with the M as a capital letter if you decide to look that up later.
All right. I'm looking it up right now, and I have to stop because I need to stay focused on this conversation. But I promise you, I am going to go take a look at that. That is really compelling. The idea of heart and math being in a single word already has me intrigued. So I will absolutely go take a look. So, Rich, I would love to get, so you asked me about the practices in my workday, and I can talk about those all day long. The reality is I work for myself, blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah.
But part of the blessing of that is I don't need anybody's permission. I don't need to worry what somebody else is going to think about me because I need a water break, a walking break, whatever that might be. I acknowledge that I have a lot of friends and audience members who aren't necessarily in that situation. They may be working in a really high pressure workplace, whether it is in medicine, whether it is in corporate, whether it's at a startup, whatever that might look like. Any advice for people who feel either like they literally can't find those 5 minutes, or they worry that it will carry some sort of stigma and they don't want to be seen as needing some sort of health break?
So this is where I think the intersection between human resources, traditional human resources, and health and well-being can be a helpful mindset. Setting priorities is a helpful skill, and it is related to health and well-being. We have to determine what are our top priorities. And if you start getting into a second hand as you list them, there's probably too many. And if you don't know what your priorities are, ask your manager. And even if you think you know what your priorities are, ask your manager so that you can know where your energy needs to be focused, and so that you have parameters to build boundaries. So once you have your priorities, then you can make your boundaries. And once you have your boundaries, you have time to take care of yourself. Now, again, you shouldn't have to carve out too much time during your workday if you can integrate your well-being practices while you're working. I gave an example about mindful walking where you're feeling your feet, but even just the simple practice of taking deep breaths while you're working. Too often when we're stressed, we hold our breath. And when we hold our breath, it causes our muscles to tighten. For many people, those muscles are tighter around their neck and their shoulders. It can cause us to have headaches. Holding our breath can increase our blood pressure. So even just having a sticky note that says breathe deeply on your computer can be a big benefit.
That is pretty simple and accessible for anybody, right?
Yeah, it's free, it's portable, and everyone can learn how to breathe deeply.
That's amazing.
Yes.
I'd love to get your take. I feel like we have been banging the wellness at work drum for decades now. Mm-hmm. And I still feel, I don't know what you're seeing. I still feel like in my world, it's not that people don't buy into it. They do, but I think that they see it somehow as being in competition with getting the real work done, right? Like, no, we know we'll do the wellness stuff. Let us just finish this big project. Let us just get to the finish line, and then we'll do some wellness things. To me, implies that as an organization that is kind of missing the point. And I would love to hear, how do you, as a physician, how do you make the case for shifting the perspective, and how would you want to see organizations think about wellness in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, the other piece is that I don't know that most leaders understand the connection between a healthy and well workforce and the success of their workplace. That's a huge gap. So I have to know my audience first before I can make the case. And so even inside one organization, there's different needs, different priorities, different people, different preferences. Health and well-being is a very personal area, and people have their own biases about what we should be doing and what we should not be doing. So it can make trying to put a centralized strategy together rather challenging because not everyone, a lot of people seem to be an expert, but really they're an expert about their own health and well-being. They're not an expert about everybody else's. So making the case to get it taken more seriously, it can come in a variety of forms. You choose the human resource or the finance story that you want to build. It could be around talent retention and acquisition. It could be around health plan claims. There are a number of different ways to go. However you arrive there, you want to, the holy grail is to get it written into strategic objectives so that there's accountability. Because until it's part of the business plan, it's a nice to have, not a need to have.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, it's interesting because I have seen organizations try to make the case where they talk about, when we invest in workplace wellness, we see, like you said, more attrition, we see fewer absences, we see reduced healthcare costs. But I think those are really important. And I think the piece that gets missed is I also think there's a bit of a distinction between well versus not. I don't think that the goal is just not sick. So we're not missing work and we're not having healthcare costs. When people are actually legitimately well, not only are they not absent, they are more present and they have more energy. There's more creativity. There's more innovation. There's more fuel for collaboration. And so I think there's this piece that gets missed in the conversation where it's not just about not losing money. It is about feeding the engine that fuels the things that really drive profit and growth and impact for customers, patients, and clients. And I'm just really interested in seeing the conversation go more in that direction.
I think it's helpful to connect with the decision makers on a personal basis. And I don't mean personal, let's go out to lunch. I mean, what is it about their health and well-being and what are their workplace challenges that you might be able to connect with? It's particularly helpful for them to experience a well moment during the workday that you can bring to them. If you can engage them as an individual, not just as a decision maker, I think you stand a better chance of helping them expand their mind to see how this could impact others. But it's also, you're not going to get where you want to be if you can't connect to the business plan in some way or another. So, for example, if you know that stress is a problem in the workplace and you don't think going to your leaders for the 10th time to say we should look at stress and do something about it, maybe you need to think creatively. What can stress cause? Well, stress can increase blood pressure. And stress can lead to anxiety. What are our health plan claims costs for anxiety and hypertension? And then you can say, hey, by the way, we spend, $1 million on anxiety. Can I have $1,000 to put this program together? And it's $1 million? $1,000? You don't tell me 70% of our workforce is impacted by stress? Oh, yeah, you can have that $1,000. Things like that. Or, hey, we have 1,000 people who work here. Can I have $1,000? That's a dollar a person. So instead of asking for the whole bucket, what is it per person? Just try to break it down to them in a different way so they can kind of get some larger perspective.
I think that's a really interesting kind of reframe. So it's about contextualizing it and helping people see, I think that makes tremendous sense. And so for anybody trying to capture investment, I think that's awesome. Yeah. I'd love to talk a little bit about, another thing that I see happen is that organizations in a lot of cases are making the investments, they're bringing in the programs, and the problems that they're having are around uptake. And I don't know how much that is employees choosing not to lean in. I don't know how much that's about leaders not making the time or the space, but I'm curious what you're seeing. And I would love to get your perspective, Rich, on the role of the leader in an organization. What is a leader's role? What is their responsibility in the wellness of their teams and people?
Yeah, they have a lot of responsibilities, and most of them don't realize health and well-being is one of their responsibilities. And most of them don't realize that their core responsibilities impact the health and well-being of those they lead. So I'll break it down again to HR or management core practices versus what many think are traditional health and well-being. So even just this idea of setting priorities with your team, that is not only a business practice, that is a health and well-being practice. When if I'm speaking we because I'm a team leader, when we help our team members understand their priorities, we've just lowered their stress levels. We've also just given them permission for how to respond to other people outside the team when they're approached and asked for help. You've just given your team member a mental health gift. On the other side, the more traditional health and well-being, if you can figure out how to support the health and well-being practices of those members on your team, you're also giving them a gift. Like, don't bring donuts in. You might be thinking you're nice. People aren't going to say that was mean, because that would seem crazy. But if you're the person who has diabetes and your boss puts a plate of donuts on the table, that's not easy. Hey, if you put chocolate on the table, Rachel, I'm going to eat it. And I'm a chocoholic. And so we want to be able to support them. The best way we can support them is to ask them what they need to support their health and well-being. Now, most people aren't going to answer genuinely because most people don't have a very open and trusting relationship with their manager. So you could start by telling your team what are your health and well-being challenges in the workplace as a step on a journey forward to being more transparent about this whole area. I wrote a whole book. There's a whole book chapter on the role of the leader in my book, Rachel, A Cure for the Common Company.
Okay, that's fabulous. And we'll have links to that in the show notes. Because I hear that from leaders a lot where they'll say things like, I want to support my team, but I don't want to ask questions and I don't want to pry and I don't want to step on a territory that isn't my business. And so you just offered a really nice roadmap, which is you don't have to ask questions, but whatever you are willing to share about yourself, and that doesn't have to be about personal details of your health, but what are some of your challenges? What are some of your practices? Talk about it. And then presumably role model it as well, right? I mean, you walk into your manager's office and you see a "don't forget to breathe" posted on their laptop. Like, that seems like a good idea. Or I think if you're a leader, one of the things I love is invite, the next time you have a one-on-one with someone, see if you can do it walking. Maybe not if you have like a really, really heavy conversation to have, but if it's just a check-in, a catch-up, do it on purpose.
I think leaders might be surprised at what their employees might answer when asked, what can I do to support your health and well-being? You might hear someone say, fix the copy machine. It's driving me nuts. Or, can't we do this other process differently? I think we could be more efficient and that would free up some time. But how we do our work is just as important as getting steps in during the day.
So, Rich, what is something that I haven't asked you yet that you feel is important to this conversation? Anything coming up for you?
Oh boy. It feels like we've covered a broad span. I would say for most people listening to this podcast, you're probably not sure how to get started with changing the way you look at work. I think it's worth stepping back and reflecting. I know that I journal, and I journal in a sequence that parallels my workday. In other words, I try to make sure that I'm noting the healthy foods I'm eating in the morning, what kind of movement I'm getting in during the morning, and what type of calming exercise I'm doing during that half of the day. And then I do it again in the afternoon. And at night, I have a routine that helps lower my stress level because that routine involves being already set when I wake up in the morning. Like everything's in place. This is me. I know what I need. And maybe people who are listening to this don't know what they need, and perhaps journaling could help you find an initial path. And don't be afraid if the first path is not 100% correct.
And so what I hear you saying, you didn't use this word, but what I think I hear you saying is there's no one right way.
Yes.
So you have to be willing to experiment a little bit. And don't be afraid if you run an experiment and it's not the thing, because then you have data, that didn't work. You just try something different.
Yeah. And tracking through journaling is a known method for helping us think through what's working and not working. And it's a known path to giving ourselves some accountability.
I think that is a beautiful place to end. How does that feel to you?
It feels great. It feels like it's the beginning. You have a really important audience, and I hope this is the beginning for them of a continued journey towards exploring their own health and well-being and how they can support those around them.
Dr. Rich Safir, thank you again so much for joining me today. It has been a great pleasure and a wonderful learning experience for me.
Thank you, Rachel.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Rich Safir. You can learn more about him at his website, richardsafir.com, which you'll also find in the show notes. Join me next week for another great episode of Modern Mentor. Until then, visit my website at leadabovedoise.com. You can follow Modern Mentor on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thanks so much for listening and have a successful week. Modern Mentor is a quick and dirty tips podcast. It's audio engineered by Dan Fauerbend. Our director of podcasts is Holly Hutchings. Our podcast and advertising operations specialist is Morgan Christensen, and our marketing contractor is Nathaniel Hoops.